Good morning, everybody. My name is Andrew Plato, and we are going to be speaking today about writing for cybersecurity, the art of cybersecurity writing. Is another title for this. I want to thank all of you for taking the time out of your day to attend this webinar, and I appreciate you all listening into this. My ultimate goal today and my intent is really to help you become a better cybersecurity writer. We are recording this webinar, as I mentioned, so if you zone out at some point, or as I said, if your cat drops coffee in your lap or something, don't worry, you can go back and listen to this later. Slides will also be made available as well. So let me take a second to introduce myself to those of you who don't know who I am. I'm Andrew Plato. I am the CEO of Anitian. I am also a principal at Truebit Cyber Partners, which is a industry analyst and technical due diligence consulting firm. I've been in information security for well over 20 years. I started Anitian back in 1995. Anitian is actually one of the oldest InfoSec firms in the country. I was a technical writer before I was in information security. So writing has been part of my life, my whole life. I've been a writer since I was a child. In fact, it is writing that got me into information security. When I worked at Microsoft back in 1995, my job was documenting databases, which, let me tell you, is truly one of the most exciting jobs. I mean, there's like astronaut, there's like daredevil, there's like writing technical docs for SQL Server. They're right up there together. I was sarcastic back then too. While documenting databases, I copy-pasted a SQL query out of whatever SQL tool we were using at the time into one of the first e-commerce websites. So I worked at Microsoft on one of the early, I mean, we're talking before Amazon, before eBay, one of the first online e-commerce sites. Hit enter and it executed the query. What I had done, and I didn't know this at the time, was I had executed a SQL injection attack. Probably the most pervasive website attack you can in the world, really. It's accounted for numerous, probably thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of breaches. When I went to the developers to explain to them this thing I'd found, they were very dismissive of me. They basically said, shut up and go away. What I lacked at that time, and this story is highly relevant to what we're going to talk about today, is I lacked the ability, the words, and the structure to communicate the complexity and the nuances of what I had discovered to these developers. And because I was unable to communicate with them, they dismissed me. They acted like I was a nobody and wouldn't listen to me. And this is important, and the reason I tell you this story is, one, because I like telling the story and it's because it involves me, but that's the other reason I tell you this story is because it's extremely relevant to what we're going to talk about today, okay? Let me take a second and let me tell you about Anitian. I know you didn't come here for a sales pitch, but you're going to get one whether you like it or not. At Anitian, we're all about building great security. At Anitian, we believe that security is essential to growth, innovation, and prosperity. If you want your business to grow, information security is a core dimension of that. Our company is organized around 5 primary practice areas, which you see listed here, that involve everything from risk assessment. We do compliance work. Managed security is probably the biggest growing area of our business right now. This is something we've been doing for many years, but we're investing a lot in it. We have an innovative virtual SOC sort of model. We have an AWS platform for managed security. We do managed detection and response. And also we do, of course, leadership as a service. Okay, so what are we going to talk about today? As I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, my real goal today is just to help you become a better writer. So I'm just going to throw a lot of ideas at you today. I'm going to show you some examples. I'm going to help you at the end of this presentation. I'm going to give you a couple of good tips that'll make you a better security writer of security policies, documents, programs, what have you, incident response plans, you name it. Ultimately, I want to help you improve your security program. If you have good policies and good documents, I believe, as most of us in Anitian do, or all of us at Anitian knew, is that good documentation can really make a pretty significant difference in the capability and the effectiveness of your security program. My other intent, which is just to sort of, I'm just being honest about it, is of course to demonstrate Anitian's expertise and their capabilities. And so the outline of our presentation is we're going to talk a little about the challenges of communicating complexity, which gets back to exactly that problem I faced in 1995. Why didn't the developers listen to me? Then I'm going to give you some sins of bad policy writing. Then I've got 10 tips, 10 steps that'll help you be a better writer. And then we'll wrap up with some examples and some good ideas. Couple of assumptions before we get too deep into this. We've spent the better part of 20-some years at Anitian reading security policies. We have probably a terabyte worth of policies accumulated from all of our clients, on our file share. Policies of every kind, shape, size that we've sort of, customers have provided to us over the time. The thing we've come to realize is that over these many years is that people just simply don't read policies. But they read them for a number of reasons. And we hear this repeatedly when we go out and we interview people, we talk to people as part of our risk assessment practice. First off, they don't read them because they don't exist. That's probably the biggest problem. If you don't write a policy, then obviously you're not going to be able to communicate anything. But of the ones that do exist, the reality is that they're boring. They're just flat out dull. They're poorly written. They use a variety of things and techniques and tactics that just they make people not want to read them. They're inconsistent. There's lots of passive aggressiveness in them, intolerance. They're punitive. But ultimately, the real problem is that most security policies are not written for people. They're written they're written about security, or they're written about the security program, or they're written about the person who actually wrote it, and not for the reader. So we believe, and I believe, that in order to improve this, we've got to increase ownership of content. And what I mean by that is getting the reader more involved in what it is we're actually communicating so that they can understand it. We need to be able to communicate to different kinds of readers simultaneously. This is not only appealing to technical people, but appealing to non-technical people. And then the next thing we have to be able to do is really super hyper simplify very complicated things. Now these are three huge challenges, and I will tell you, as any writer can say, every writer in the world faces these problems. But there are steps and there's techniques to fix that, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So let's start with this complexity problem. You remember from the story I told just a little bit ago, when I went in and met with these developers in 1995, we had a really complicated problem, right? It was a problem of, injecting code into SQL through a web browser. It was sort of something that nobody ever really thought about. And it was exactly what the guys said to me. They said, oh, nobody would think to do this. It's just to talking about how we do think about things. We think in really super complicated ways. Our brains are amazing organs. They are highly, highly relational. The way you think about things is completely unique to you. And the way you understand things is completely unique to you, and therefore completely unique to everybody else in the world. I may intimately understand SQL injection, for example, and be able to just say SQL injection, and for me that means many different things. I, for example, have a very strong emotional connection to that because it was such a defining thing that happened in my life. And so I have emotions and other things tied up in that concept. Whereas most people would go, SQL, what? That's it. They have no relation to it. Our thinking is extremely complicated. And the biggest problem with a lot of writers is they try to write like they think. And that doesn't work. It doesn't work at all. Because you got to write like that. Very, very, very simply. And that means essentially working against your own thinking. You have to kind of pivot against your own brain because your brain understands certain things. You can't just write that way. And then you look at a lot of amateur writers, they just leave a lot of things out or they assume a lot of things. But how you write is not just a facet of putting A to B to C, it's also about a voice. Because all writers, even amateur writers, you have a voice. The voice that's in your head, so to speak. It's not uncommon that writers often have lots of voices in their heads. Those are characters, right? The challenge we have in information security is that InfoSec writers have more than a few voices in their head, and they're not particularly good voices. The first voice that I think is in their heads is this, that they believe nobody respects them. And I hear this a lot when I meet with security practitioners, this sort of constant drone of, nobody listens to me, nobody does what we're supposed to do, we write policy, they don't follow them, there's rules, nobody listens to them. There's this sort of general feeling of disrespect, even today, even here in 2017, where you've got a zillion breaches, and cybersecurity is finally now at the board level and executive level. Even today, we're still struggling to get people to listen to us. And you see this reflected in cybersecurity writing, but it's reflected and it translates into something much different. It translates into this. Because when we read a lot of security policies, they sound like that guy. They sound like you're screaming at people. It's this indignation or this I'm smarter than you. And you see it in a lot of cybersecurity presentations. Black Hat's going on this week. Obviously, I'm not there. One of the reasons I can't stand Black Hat and RSA and some of these other conferences is because of exactly this problem. These InfoSec professionals get on stage and they start with this indignation attitude, this, you're all stupid. None of you understand how important this is. Everybody's an idiot. Let me tell you how smart I am. I'm so smart. I'm brilliant. You need to respect my authority. I'm smart and I'm brilliant. You better respect me. And the thing is that works in a presentation to a certain group of people, right? There's a certain group of people who kind of go along with that, like, oh, yeah, you're cool. But when you translate that down into writing, it doesn't work at all. Because when you write that way, and those words, what the reader hears is nothing. They don't listen. They don't read. They don't understand. And they certainly don't respect. Because it comes across as punitive. It comes across as aggressive, sometimes passive-aggressive. The fact is that it just isn't getting read. And if it isn't getting read, it isn't getting followed. And if it isn't getting followed, then it isn't protecting your business. If your people don't understand the security policy and they don't follow it, then you might as well almost not have had one. So the first step to fixing this problem is you have to change the voice in your head. You've got to change the person who's talking. I find one of the simplest ways to do this is to think about a character that you respect, a person you respect, and kind of start thinking and talking like them. You could use somebody like this, Morgan Freeman. I mean, let's face it, when Morgan Freeman starts talking, you listen because he's kind of got that, folksy voice. Or maybe some other wise character figure. Maybe you could go the Gandalf route, right? Who wouldn't listen to Gandalf? He's a wise, wizened, man. Of course, he had a magic and some other things that we don't have as writers. So maybe we can ground ourselves back in reality. We can go with somebody more like Judi Dench. Let's face it, when Judi Dench speaks, you listen, right? Because she's badass. Let's face it, right? My personal favorite, the guy that I like to think about when I write, is this guy. I like to think of Spock. Spock is logical. He is reasoned. He is he never gets upset. This is a good voice. And the reason I say this is that when you start with a voice like this, and you start writing with that kind of voice in your head, now it's no longer about trying to prove something to somebody. Now it's more about actually communicating to your reader. And that's why these voices, these characters, can help accomplish that. However, and now I am about to give you the most important lesson you will ever learn as a writer. This is a lesson that every writer throughout history has had to learn, and learn the hard way, because nobody seems to learn this lesson. So I can tell you this lesson, and you're all going to nod your heads, and you're all going to go, yeah, right on, Andrew. Maybe some of you won't. But it's going to take a while before this one really hits home. And I will tell you that intelligent people, of which I know most of you in the audience are, all of you are in the audience are, of course, you're going to struggle the most with this lesson, because it's a tough, tough lesson to learn as an intelligent person. I don't care how correct you are, because if nobody reads your work or nobody respects what you say, it doesn't matter that you're right. And as an intelligent, logical, reasoned person, this one will just grate your nerves, because you could write the world's most perfect policy, absolutely precisely accurate in every conceivable dimension. You could align it perfectly with ISO and PCI and NIST and DFARS and HIPAA and high trust, whatever framework du jour you're into. It could be the most elegant, the most wonderfully written, every auditor would frame this thing and go, my, look at that glorious policy on the wall. But if nobody reads that policy and nobody follows it, or nobody understands it, or nobody respects it, you just completely and totally wasted your time, and you might as well have gone off and gotten drunk. You would have at least had more fun. Okay? It doesn't matter that you're right. You can be completely right and be completely wrong at the same time. You have got to get that point across to people. And this is salient and important to writing policies. It doesn't matter if the policy's right. It matters about the communication, which gets us to our next big important point that all of us need to kind of hammer into our heads. And this is another one that takes a long time as a writer to really learn. Who is responsible for communicating security policies? Or you can ask the more general version of this question, which is, who is responsible for communicating? The writer or the reader? If you're the writer, it's you. You, as the writer, are responsible for effective communication. It is not the reader's responsibility to figure you out, because they don't live in your brain. And if they do, that's weird. I think that's a Star Trek episode, actually, where you live in someone's brain. Okay? They don't live in your brain. You don't want them living in your brain, probably. Your job is to communicate to them. And that means you got to think about the way they're going to take in information. Okay? And I don't know how many security policies I've written where it's so blatantly obvious that the writer didn't spend a second thinking about what the reader was going to think or how they were going to take that in. They spent all their time worrying about ISO and PCI and frameworks and policies and encryption methodologies, and didn't think a damn second about, wow, I wonder if anybody will actually understand this. You are responsible for effective communication. And when you look at great communicators of complexity, and these are people that I would say are excellent communicators of complicated ideas, right? You've got Stephen Hawking and Carl Sagan. My personal favorite on this list is James Burke. If any of you have ever seen his Connection series from the 70s, that actually got me into technology. It's a wonderful series, probably one of the best PBS series out there. I love James Burke because he takes these super intricate concepts about history and innovation and technology, and he kind of weaves them into these great stories, and it really helps you learn a lot about technology. But these are people who, they take that complexity and they render it into something simple. They render it into great narratives. They render it into great stories. They render it into things that readers can understand. More importantly, these are people who think about what the reader or the listener, in the case of some of the TV personalities here, what the listener is actually going to hear and how they're going to hear. Now, how do they do that? Well, the techniques of doing this are actually been around for a long time. It starts with an understanding of how we learn things. Human beings, quite frankly, and I'm not going to get into metaphysical ways we can learn things. Okay, that's a little beyond my skill set. But ultimately and biologically, we learn things through three main channels. We can hear them, auditory learning. We can see them, right? Images, graphics, whatever. Or we can do it, right? Played sports, right? You hit the ball, you pitch, right? You do it enough times, you kind of learn it. Your body sort of learns it. The kinesthetic, they say it is. And here's the thing about language. We can actually mimic these three techniques in language. And when you do that, it actually helps people understand better. So, for example, auditory. By using certain words, people will suddenly hear what you're saying. Leadership has voiced a concern. It sounds like. These types of words actually suddenly turn on our auditory learning capabilities. So if you say that or you write that in a document, then people will actually hear it, and it'll be easier for them to understand it. Likewise goes with visual. The same principles work. Certain words, look, see, colors, any way you can visually describe something. Look at the improvements we've made. As you can see, this risk assessment graph is an increasing layer of, increasing in the severity of threats. Something like that, as you can see, suddenly the reader will see the chart in their mind, which means they'll understand it better. And of course, you can use action-oriented words to get people kind of doing things in their heads. Rather than telling people the software must be installed on all systems that are required for PCI compliance, which sounds like something stiff and boring, and I want to, I want to go drinking after reading that, right? You could say something like, install the software and scan the network. Now it's an action thing. Hey, let's get out there. Come on, let's go install some things. Yeah. It's active-oriented. And because of that, the user suddenly is in the middle of that, doing it. And if they're doing it, even in their minds, they're learning. So this is step number one. Use these three techniques to get people to understand what it is you're trying to say. There's also another technique, and it's been around forever. This one's as old as Greek Republic. And anybody who had a college rhetoric class, you're sitting there going, oh, God, I remember this. Because I had a rhetoric class. I actually have a rhetoric degree. So I had to learn this one in many, many, many times. Logos, ethos, pathos. Logic, ethics, and emotions. It's the three modes of persuasion. You want to get people to follow you. You want to get people to listen to you. You want to get people to understand you. You need to appeal to all three of these. But you got to understand how to use them and how to wield these. Logic, proof, great. Intelligent people generally respect logic, okay? But it lacks stickiness, particularly in today's culture. Logic is tough to use nowadays because the truth is there's a lot of illogicalness out there. Okay, so logic is great when you're trying to appeal to a very intelligent audience that demands proof. But it's not the only thing. If logic is all you use, you will not persuade most people. You can go for the ethical argument, doing things right. This is the right thing to do because it's good for people, it helps the environment, it's good for our community, it'll defend our country, something like that. You're appealing to a sense of right and wrong. That's balanced. That has strengths and weaknesses. It can come off preachy if you say it too much, right? If every sentence starts with, because we love, our country, yada, 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 after a while it's like, yeah, I get it, buddy. It's a little preachy. So your last one is, of course, the emotions. Hate, fear, disgust, love, all those good emotional components of our lives. Emotional arguments are difficult to use. They're very, very strong. They can be the most strongest and the most persuasive arguments you can use. They can also create blowback on you, right? We don't patch, the hackers will steal everything and we'll lose our jobs, right? It's kind of emotional. I'm going to lose my job, right? But it can also have the reverse effect of whatever. So each three of these, if you use them together and you intermix them throughout everything you do, along with the other things, this is how you start to communicate complexity. So let's start talking about, now that we have sort of a general idea of how to get complexity across to people, let's talk about the ways that it's done poorly. Because there's a lot of bad policies out there, and trust me, I think I've read every one of them. Sometimes it feels that way. Let's start with the first one. What the heck are you writing? If you don't know the answer to what you're writing, then how do you expect the reader to know that? Never, ever assume the reader knows what the heck the document is about, okay? Define it. Use the first sentence of the document. This document will describe our risk assessment methodology. This document defines. This document is. This document will. Something like that. Explain exactly what it is. And keep in mind, there's different kinds of security documents. You have policies, which are the do this. You have the standards, procedures, guidelines, methodologies, and reports. And don't forget, reports is the after the fact. We did this, here's the results of that. So if you don't know what you're writing, how the heck do you expect that reader to do it? Step number one, what are you writing? Step number two is, why should I care about this? Okay, this gets to Simon Sinek's principle of starting with why. You've got to anchor everything you do in a reason. Why? What's the intent here? Very beginning of this, what's the first thing I did? I told you what my intent was today. My intent's to make you a better writer. That's my why. Everything I'm doing right now is about that. Okay? Your documents have to do the same thing. It is intended to help you do your job better and minimize our risk. That is an honest statement of intent. We want you to be better at your job, and we want to minimize our risk. That's a solid intent. And now it's clear. It isn't muddy. It isn't confusing. You should define whatever words or concepts are out there that people might not get, but define them in a way they'll actually understand. Don't take the don't take the definition out of the NIST 830 manual, because I guarantee you the majority of human beings will not understand those definitions. I'm not even sure I understand them. Okay? Who wrote the document is another good thing to put in there. Who wrote it? This is written by the, I have it here, the ISO is the author, the Director of Security, CISO, whatever. Because now it's clear who it's coming from. The voice now is cemented in the reader's head. If you say who wrote the document, guess what the reader does? They picture you. They see your face. Suddenly you're now talking to them. If you don't give them a person who wrote this, they'll make up somebody. And I guarantee you the person they're going to make up is not the person you want telling them a policy. It'll probably be some tyrannical lunatic or some dorky weirdo. It's not going to be the face you want. So if you want to fix a face in somebody's head when they're reading a document, then give them that face. Lastly, no opinions, no theories, no interpretations of the purpose. No, this document's intended to show our risk assessment methodology, which is poorly aligned with ISO 27000 whatever because our company won't do the right things. Hey, none of that. Keep your opinions to yourself, okay? They certainly don't belong in a policy document, no matter how many ways you think they do. Which really gets us to our next topic. Stop writing for yourself. Start writing for the reading. Okay? None of the CYA text. God, I don't know how many policies I've read that are just absolutely filled with CYA. Also because the board's only authorizing, and they've got this whiny, passive-aggressive, kind of pissy little attitude of like, because the company won't give us the resources, this policy is insufficient. Shut the hell up is all I'm thinking when I read these things. You have to understand that I know you think you're like, saying it like it is. I'm just being realistic here. No, you're not. You come off sounding like a whiny weasel to the reader. okay? No CYA text, no posturing, no pontificating, no blathering on about the rights and wrongs of your company, okay? Just get to the point. Write for the reader, not for you, not for the auditor. I'm going to come back to that auditor comment later. Get to the point. Be precise about what you're trying to say. Don't wander around things. Don't complain. Don't use weird emotional words. You know, management has elected to oppress the expression of security and control line. Well, what the hell? I actually took that out of a policy manual I read. It's like, what? Oppress? I mean, come on, you know? Nobody's oppressing you, okay? Wrong word, buddy. Just, again, this is kind of the same variant of what I just said, but it is that get to the point. Don't blather around the topic. Don't try to make everything sound big and important and impressive. You just sound like an idiot to the reader. Speaking of sounding like an idiot to the reader, here's another way you can sound like an idiot to the reader, right? Next generation envelope pushing pigs with lipsticks, energizing viral winds, rising boats, best of breed, paradigm aligning. We got to align our best of breed synergies here for major market penetration. Ping me when you're ready for a deep dive. I expect 110% because this is a real win-win situation on steroids in the cloud. Okay, cliches are, just don't freaking use cliches, okay? Seriously, just don't do it. I don't care how clever and funny you think you are, cliches don't ever work. Nobody likes them. They read terribly. They also date you, okay? They'll date things really badly because cliches, of course, come and go over time. Anytime I see the word synergy, I'm like, oh, dude, that is so 1999, you know? Okay, no cliches ever. Get them out of your documents, period. And I don't even want to hear a reason why you should. Next one. The Great Wall of Text. Too long, didn't read. Here's the thing, and I notice this about intelligent people when they write. Something weird about intelligent people is they love to show off. They love to show their knowledge to people. And it's definitely a part of IT and the culture of IT and information security for that matter. They love to kind of, you know, let me tell you how this works here. Okay, you need to understand that according to policy number 37D in the PCI manual, let me explain in long-winded detail. Let me go on for the next 45 minutes blathering to you about this policy. Okay, here's the first thing. Nobody gives a rip about your knowledge, okay? And here's a weird little thing and a little insight I'm going to give you. The more you talk about how much you know, the stupider you actually sound. Because at a certain point, you tip over and you start sounding defensive. And then you start sounding like, what the hell is wrong with this person? The more you try to explain every nuance, you actually sound stupider. And if you go and watch the great scientific communicators, I mentioned the James Burkes and whatever, don't get me wrong, they talk and they are very detailed, but they don't go on and on and on and on about what they know. They just kind of say things. And they say them from a point of authority. There's no debate about what they're saying. So, less is more here is the other principle. And my last big piece of advice and the last big sin I see, and this is endemic to almost every security policy, and this is going to require a big mind shift, there's a cliche for you, in the way you write. Don't write in the third person, write in the second person. The third person allows the reader to disassociate themselves from the content, right? When you write, employees are required to meet strict password complexity guidelines. That's the third person, right? Employees, they are required. In my mind, I can easily disassociate myself from that. Oh, well, that doesn't apply to me. That applies to employees. Those other employees, you know, users are required to, enter the multi-factor authentication. Okay, that applies to those other users, not me. I'm excluded from that. Not me. It's awkward to write, but it feels right when you write in the second person. And in the second person, you're addressing the user the reader, I should say, directly. And you're getting them involved in the content. Our security is important. You must use or need to use complex passwords. Now there's no debate. You. That means you, the person reading this document, need to do this. You need to write this. You need to follow this. You. Now I know you're going to say, whoa, Andrew, my English professor told me never write you. It's it's not business writing. Okay, screw your English professor. Okay, I don't care what he or she said. I had the same professor too, right? We're not writing essays for the College Board here, my friends. We're writing policies to get people to follow them. We got to direct them right to the reader. You change all of your policies to the second person, you will immediately notice people will follow them more often because suddenly you involve them in the actual policy. Which gets us to my 10 steps for becoming a better writer. So at this point, you've heard a lot of the problems, a lot of the issues, and you're saying, all right, Andrew, I'm sold. I want to be a better writer. I want to do these things. How am I going to do that? Well, I've told you a few already, right? In the second person, you've gotten a few of these. Now I want to give you 10 really just you can start doing them right now, today. You do these things, all 10 of these things, I guarantee your writing will be fundamentally better than anybody else out there. Okay? So number one, the time is now. Write everything as if it's happening at this exact very moment. Okay? Don't ever write anything in the past or future tense if you can avoid it. And use action words, implement, do, install, apply, distribute. Something that is like, do it right now. Okay? There is no tomorrow. Everything's happening at this very moment. And you don't care about what happened in the past. When you write in the present tense, it's active. It engages, it inspires, it gets people going. You write in the past tense, it's like, that's optional. I don't even think about it. Okay? That's already happened. You write in the future tense, that's almost worse in some respects because then it's like, yeah, we'll get to that someday. That's version 10. I don't need to think about that now. Right now. Right now. Okay? The time is now. When you start writing, go all into whatever you're saying. Never express even a shred of doubt about what you're saying. Your words should be the infallible words of the Almighty handed down from the clouds of whatever you believe in. There absolutely cannot be any question that what you are saying is absolutely correct. And here's why. The minute you express even the slightest amount of doubt about what you're saying, or the slightest amount of uncertainty, your reader thinks, oh, you don't know what you're talking about, so I don't need to listen to you. And you'd be surprised how easy it is to dismiss somebody who kind of tries to weigh things up. It's exactly why the developers dismissed me in 1995. I wasn't real sure about what I was doing. And because of that, they didn't listen to me. They didn't care. You cannot express doubt. And here's the problem, and I know most of you suffer from this because I do too. You're intelligent. You have the capability to weigh up multiple ideas. You have a multifaceted brain, and it's natural for you to do that. An intelligent person does weigh up multiple things. Intelligent people often have a lot of doubt inside them. Right? That's the Dunning-Kruger principle right there. Stupid people never have any doubt because they're stupid. Right? They don't know any better. Intelligent people were always racked with doubt. Well, it could be this and could be that, right? The minute you write that doubt, you sound stupid. You can't express any form of doubt in anything you ever write. It just makes it unreadable. Oh, here we go. Be better to be strong and wrong. Watch out for, there's words you got to watch out for. The could, should, might, try, and hope. Those are weak doubt words. Hope and try are the worst of them all. You know, I'll try, we'll try to meet encryption guidelines. Okay, that means you're not going to. That means it's optional. You know, we hope this will help you understand our security controls. Hope, okay, that's, hope is for Christmas, all right? Hope is for episode 4, A New Hope, Okay? Hope isn't in your security policy. All right? This isn't a new hope. This is the way we're doing things. All right? All right. What is the behavior you want people to follow? You need to answer that question, and then you need to just say that and say nothing else. If you want your users to change their passwords, that's the behavior you want, then say it. If you want users to not copy confidential data, then say that. Don't say a bunch of, well, according to PCI standard requirement number 13D, it clearly states here, and spend 600, words explaining them all the reasons here. And you must understand that according to our board of committee of teams of security, compliance, alignment, risk management, blah, 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 oh, you shouldn't copy data. Because all that other fluff, all that other CYA, all that other crap, that's for you. That isn't for the reader. Just tell the reader the behavior you want. Don't tell them anything else. Don't copy data. Thank you. Have a nice day. Right? Keep it simple. And here's your next big one about visualizing the reader. Remember how I told you that when you're writing this, you want to kind of think about that voice? Remember I had the Morgan Freeman, the Spock, Judi Dench? Okay. When you start writing, number one is you got to have that voice. Number two is you got to think about who you're writing to. And you should visualize them. You should literally think of them standing in front of you and picture them. See them in your mind and write to that person. Now, this is an advanced writing topic, but I throw it in there because it'll help you. It helped me a lot as a writer. Tell them what they need to hear and not what you want to say. What is it that that person, imagine, let's say you're writing a policy that's going to apply to all of the network administrators in your company. Let's say you've got 10 of them spread out across the country. You're a big company. Okay, think about the network administrator who's kind of the biggest doofus. Actually, they're probably all doofuses. They're network admins, right? No, I'm kidding. I joke. Network admins necessary in life. Okay, think about the guy or girl who you really need to communicate this to. Picture them in your head and imagine you're basically writing it directly to them. I need you. You need to not enable telnet on all the routers, okay? Don't enable telnet, right? Say something and say it as directly as you possibly can. Don't add in all the justifications for it. Because the minute you start justifying yourself, don't enable telnet because, it's wrong and bad and blah, blah, you sound weak. It's not a policy anymore. It starts to become like a debate right to the reader. Which gets us to this last big one. If you can't explain something, or this big one, which is you can't explain something simply enough, then you probably don't understand. It's a great, or you don't understand it well enough. It's a great Einstein quote. And I've said this a couple of times, but I want to reiterate it one last time here, and I want to keep getting on this, which is the more you write, the stupider you sound. The longer things are, the worse it sounds. This is true of everything, reports, documents. I know exactly what a few of you are thinking. Oh, but Andrew, the auditor told us, okay, look, if your auditor wants you to write some 8,000-page document, okay, first off, you need a new auditor. Secondly, they're not a very good auditor, okay? Because you don't need that. It's ridiculous. It's pointless. A good auditor is going to read your document and say, yes, this communicates an important point to your users. I get it. You're good to go here. A bad auditor is going to go, well, I don't see the word PCI 3.1 in here. You're failing. And they're going to run off and be weasels to some other customer. Okay? Don't write for auditors. Write for readers. And if your auditor doesn't see that, get a new auditor. Okay? Lead your readers. Dribble information out slowly to them. One thought per sentence, 1 point per paragraph. Put the most important detail as the object of the sentence. It's called backloading a sentence, right? All data is encrypted. Encrypted is the most important word there. It is stored in the SQL Server at AWS. SQL Server at AWS is the most important concept there. Access is restricted to developers. Developers is important, but it's only So you're putting the most important concepts and you're leading the reader down a path and dribbling the information out to them one step at a time. Come on strong in your documents. Pound them hard. Get them in those first few sentences because that's where you're really going to capture people. I tell all the consultants here, put the majority of your effort into writing the executive summary. It's the only thing that ever actually gets read. You want to get really creative with this, you can do what's called a hook frame. You write like use some sort of like anecdote or narrative or something where you kind of capture the reader. You get them into the document, and then you repeat that at the end of the document. It's good for reports, good for blogs, kind of more of an essay technique. You can use an image. Images are really good for this. So try and think of an image that kind of encapsulates whatever it is you're trying to communicate, and then use that image in the very beginning of the document. Maybe it's an image of your company. Maybe it's an image of a patient. Maybe it's the image of a customer. Put that image in the reader's head and then repeat that at the end of the document. That's a hook frame. It creates a structure in a person's brain that allows them to relate to it easier. That's why a lot of documents, a lot of essays are written that way. Next, put things in tables. Tables are the greatest thing in the world for communicating complex, interrelated information. They're pleasing to the eye. They're easy for people to get into. They also help you communicate things to multiple audiences. A table is a great structure. Use them. Use a lot of them. If you can table a concept, you're more likely to communicate it to the people who are going to be reading it. Be careful. Don't overstyle. Keep order in your words. Subject, verb, object. Keep everything where it's supposed to be. And more importantly, whenever possible, make the subject of every sentence you write a person or a living thing. Because if it's a living thing, then the reader can more appropriately relate to it. Even if it's only a computer, that helps, but because usually IT people can relate to that. But notice my example. The NOC team scans the network. NOC team is a group of people. The ISO reviews the results, again, a person. Help desk personnel may not access cardholder data. So I'm doing a couple of different things in these sentences. Help desk personnel, person. Instantaneously, I can relate to the sentence, especially if I'm a help desk person. May not access cardholder data. Cardholder data is the most important concept in that sentence. It's at the end of the sentence. It's the object. A person do unto something. That's your structure. That is a pleasing intellectual structure for readers. It will get things across very well. And my last and most important of all the things I'm going to tell you today, do not, under any circumstances, use the word by. You need to nuke the word by out of existence. Everything you ever write, you should search for the word by. And if you see it, rewrite the sentence to not use the word by. It almost always, with 95, 97% assurance, means you're writing in passive voice. Passive voice is evil. It is wrong. It is handed down from whatever you believe in, and it's a bad guy. That's where passive voice comes from. Okay? It comes from the depths of hell. So, no, or somewhere like that. That's pretty bad. No passive voice. It's incredibly difficult to read. Now, here's the problem. Most intelligent people write in passive voice because it's the way you think. Your brain tends to turn things around. So I always tell my consultants when I'm editing their work, I did a lot of flipping of your sentences. That's flipping the sentence around so that the object is the subject and the subject is now the object. All right, my last final thoughts. Happy to take some questions after this. If you have any questions at this point, this is your time. Type them into the to the GoToMeeting or GoToWebinar thing in here, and we can read them. So a couple of good last sort of thoughts here, and then we will then we'll close up here. A couple of words and phrases you really need to avoid in whatever you're writing. First off, the meaningless adjectives: very, good, happy, nice, best, most, really. These are meaningless. They have absolutely no meaning to readers. What is nice? You know, she's nice. This is a nice way to do things. It's totally meaningless. Don't express any kind of weak hope. As I said before, hope is for Christmas. Hope is for episode 4. Hope is not for your policy documents. You don't hope your way to anything, okay? So look out for hope. It's bad. That's whenever you write shoulds, coulds, maybes, mights, or tries. Should and could are dangerous ones, okay? We should encrypt the data. That sounds like it's an option. I read that as like, yeah, you're right, we really should do that, but I'm not going to because it's tough and I'm bored and I want to go get drunk, right? I've mentioned that 3 times. I must really want to do some drinking tonight. Could's the same way. You know, this could be better. Yeah, you're right, it could, but it's not. Oh, well. Okay, that's weak hope. Touchy-feely words don't work really well either. I feel like we should do this. Yeah, I feel like we should too. You know, embrace, you know, use empower. That's a little better word, but it's not great. Touch, you know, we need to touch everybody in the organization. Ew, creepy. I don't want you to touch me. Remember, the minute you say the word touch, people imagine you like touching them. Like, ew, like sticking your fingers on their, you know, wherever you don't want it. So touch is not a good word for a policy. It's creepy. Biz speak, cliches, you know, utilize, paradigm, turnkey, win-win, etc. Useless words. I had a professor who used to say these were jack-up words. That's jack up, because they make it sound like you're like jacking up your words, like you know, like using a jack. Just really utilize, actually, literally. It literally is the most important thing we're doing. Basically, kind of. This is just, they're pointless words. It's just fluff you're adding in. And then the who cares words. The words are like, who gives a rip? You know, in my humble opinion, don't care. You know, it has been said, shut up you. As we all know. As we all know is a tough one. Because I see this a lot in security writing. You know, as we all know, who's all? And what is it we know? Don't say as we all know. Common sense, dangerous thing, because what's common sense? These are those sort of like who cares words. Use a consistent structure for all of your policy documents. Here's an example, okay? Is you can conform everything to a common structure. It just becomes easier to take in the content you need. More importantly, the consistency builds trust with the reader. With a consistent structure and a consistent look and feel, people feel like you know what you're talking about. If every policy document you have uses a different style, a different structure, or different language, or it's in a different format, it doesn't matter what's inside the document. You don't look like you know what you're talking about. So the look and feel of documents is incredibly important. That applies to styling too. Keep the style gentle. Keep it simple. Keep it down to things that people can recognize. This is a report. This is actually one of our policies. Policy document we use internally here, right? Again, we like the whole numbering scheme here. Maybe that's not to your taste, and that's fine. I know people have different opinions about that. That one's fine. But the point is that just don't go crazy with the fonts. Okay, last few things. A great security policy is going to accomplish a couple important things. Number one, it's going to lead people to a behavior that you want, which is usually to reduce risk. So the policy's purpose is always about leading people into a behavior or a set of behaviors that you want. And behavior is the word you need to focus on here. You tell somebody, go do that, that's one thing. You want to lead them to this so that they know what is the right thing to do and they can follow that and have success with that. You're going to speak directly to your readers. It's not third person. This is not some stiff army manual, okay? This is a right to the reader. And I know what you're thinking. You might say, wow, this really goes against our company culture. Well, your company culture then probably should change because you're not communicating with people. I know that's a bigger problem because really you do want the document to reflect your company culture. If your company culture is stiff and informal and treats everybody like a piece of meat, then maybe you need a new company, not a new policy document, okay? And changing your company culture is not going to be easy. In fact, it's downright impossible. But that should tell you something right there. If your whole defense here is, well, this, our company culture wouldn't allow this. Well, is this a company you really want to be at then? Because there's a bigger thing going on here. And lastly, it says what needs to be said and not a darn thing more. Nobody cares about your theories about risk management. Nobody cares about ISO, blah, blah, blah. Nobody cares about those things. They just don't care. Don't write them in there. Don't write about theories, concepts, or frameworks. Don't complain or whine or be passive-aggressive or attack your leaders. Don't speculate or theorize or conjecture about things. Say it as it is. And don't obsess over what the auditor is going to think. If you're writing a document strictly to make an auditor happy, you're probably wasting your time. You should be writing a document that meets your business needs, and a good auditor will understand that and will respect that. The thing about great writing is when you write well, when you can communicate effectively, you get what you want. You'll get the things done you need. You'll get catnip, right? Isn't this a majestic cat picture? I love this picture. You're going to get the things you want in life. Good writing has a long-term impact on people, because once you write something and commit it to the page, once you write something and commit it to a blog or a website or whatever, it can persist over time. And if it's well written and it communicates effectively, you can impact a much greater number of people than you ever could working one-on-one. This is the thing that motivates most of us writers. We want to impact as many people as possible. Good writing does that for you. It gets you the things you want, and it'll impact the most number of people. And with that, I will close up and say thank you all for listening today. And let's see if we have any questions here. Okay, we do. Let's see, kind of the best. Thank you very much. Somebody said the best presentation ever. Oh, thank you. I'm doing the best I can here. Will the slides be available later? Yes, they will be, of course. We can provide it. Somebody just asked about a PDF. Yes, absolutely. Good. Another auditor question. Okay. So the question is, our auditors are mandating that we have require certain content in our policy documents, and how should we deal with this? Okay. Well, my first response to that is always that these are the right auditors for you, because a good auditor is going to actually read your document and understand your business. I hate to say it, but there's a lot of bad auditors out there. It's an unfortunate reality, and I don't want to go down that negative path other than just to say there's a lot of bad auditors out there. A good document's going to communicate. Now, I do know companies, and this is a strategy that they've invested. I don't know if I entirely condone this, but I know it is a strategy, which is that you have differing policies based on who's reading them. And you do have policies that are more specifically geared for the auditor. It isn't ideal. I don't recommend it because it's creating a lot of work for you. But if you're kind of stuck in that situation, that is one strategy. The idea is you write policies for your users and the people who actually have to read them, and then you write sort of an interpreted version of that for the auditors. Now, the reason I say that's a problem is, of course, because you're essentially splitting up the work. Ideally, you really should have one. Another strategy you could use is use things like appendices and addendums to policies. So one strategy I've seen people use, they'll write their policy very much in alignment with, write it in the second person, write it very directly, all the things we're recommending. But then at the very end of that, then they'll have an addendum. And they make it very clear to people the addendum is optional. You don't necessarily need it. The addendum kind of addresses those auditor things that they're required to have in there. Again, it's kind of technically a weasel thing to do, but it kind of gets you what you want in the end of the day, which is you get the auditor to shut the heck up, and I respect that, and then you communicate with your users. Remember, a single document can communicate different things to different people, and if you write it properly, you can get what the auditor wants and what your end user needs in the same document. I do think the multi-set is certainly a strategy you can go with, but again, I don't know if I'd always recommend that. There's a good and downside. Another strategy I would recommend while I'm on the same topic is having policies that are written specifically for their audience. And it's the same policy, you just have kind of a couple of different variants of it. So maybe you have a policy you write specifically for your IT team. Your IT team understands a lot of IT concepts, so you write a policy for them that states, here's the idea, go for it. Maybe it's a lot shorter. But then you have a policy written specifically for just your general user base. Same policy, but it's got a little more content to it. And you're simply defining that there are 4 different audiences. This is the acceptable use policy for the IT team. This is the acceptable use policy for the rest of the company. And they can be basically the same document, just written to different audiences. Again, you're kind of creating work for yourself by doing this, but it will help you communicate. So let's see. We got one. I'm a big believer in the multi-version of policy school of thought. One for the IT folks. Yeah, well, there you go. And one for the everyman in the spirit of law. Like I said, some places that'll work, and some places it definitely won't. So let's see. See if we got any other questions here, and I don't think we do. And we are right at the 11 o'clock hour. So I will say thank you all for listening today. I really appreciate the time everybody took to be here today. I hope, here's a little bit of hope, this has helped you become a better writer. And if you have any additional questions, by all means, feel free to reach out to us here at Anitian. We're always happy to help and always happy to work with you. This presentation will be made available on, we'll have a video version of it, as well as we will post the slides. If you require a PDF, you can download that from our slides share. Again, thank you everybody for today. Everybody have a wonderful and awesome day. Take care.